All right. Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Let me do a round of introductions of all the folks that are with me on the stage here today. In no particular order, I have Michael Bueckert, who is the Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East. I have Daniel Komesch from Oxfam, Canada. I have Boutaïna Chafi from the Palestinian Youth Movement. And then I also have Khaled Al-Qazzaz from the Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council. Last but not least, I have a representative, Harry Usuran, from the United Church of Canada, although he will not be speaking today. Let me begin by, again, thanking all of you for being here today. I want to also thank the organizations and advocates joining me, including all the representatives that I have just introduced. They have done a tremendous job in working and advancing human rights and accountability. I also want to take a moment to thank my NDP caucus colleagues and my colleagues from across the aisle who seconded this bill. In particular, I would like to extend my thanks to the member from Scarborough Centre, Don Valley East, who spoke purposefully in this debate and has been a principal voice on this issue from day one. MP Salma Saeed was also the MP that called for a recorded vote. This Wednesday, March 11th, members of Parliament will finally be voting on Bill C-233, the No More Loopholes Act, at second reading. Since introducing the bill, I have been deeply grateful for the tremendous support received from people across Canada, including individuals, faith communities, labor unions, community organizations, human rights advocates, academics, and local governments. Bill C-233 addresses a very specific and long-standing gap in Canada's arms controls. Right now, roughly half of Canada's defense exports go to the United States. Those exports are exempt from the permitting and case-by-case review requirements that apply to every other destination. This means once military goods are exported to the United States, Canada loses the ability to ensure that those components are not incorporated into weapons and transfer elsewhere, including to places where there are serious risks of human rights violations. Let me be very clear about this legislation and what it does and what it does not do. Bill C-233 is not about disrupting supply chains or conducting risk assessments on everyday items, such as shoelaces, as some have suggested. The bill concerns controlled military goods already listed under Group 2 of Canada's export control list. Its purpose is straightforward: to ensure that Canadian arms are not used in grave human rights violations through what has become known as the U.S. loophole. I also want to address claims that I've been unwilling to consider amendments to make this legislation workable. That claim is simply not true. When one Liberal member asked whether I would be open to amendments, I made it clear that I would welcome constructive proposals and asked to see what that language they had in mind would look like. None was provided. Another member raised the possibility of amendments, but said that the United States could not be touched. But the loophole itself, of course, concerns exports through the United States. So addressing that problem requires confronting that reality. But I did ask, what did they have in mind? What would that amendment then look like? What do they propose? Nothing was brought forward to me. What we have seen instead are attempts to dismiss the bill with arguments that simply do not stand up to scrutiny. Two eminent Canadians, the Honourable Lloyd Axworthy, former Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Honourable Alan Rock, former Minister of Justice and former Ambassador to the United Nations, recently addressed this issue directly through an op-ed in the Globe and Mail. And they wrote that when Canada acceded to the Arms Trade Treaty in 2019, there was broad public support for a clear commitment that Canadian arms exports would never contribute to human rights abuses. Yet under the current exemption for the United States, Canada cannot ensure that components shipped south are not incorporated into weapons and transferred to high-risk end users. There are credible reports that Canadian-made components have been incorporated into weapons sold to Israel and used in operations in Gaza that resulted in civilian deaths. Since the U.S. and Israel attack on Iran last week, there has been a marked increase in settler violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. Let us not turn a blind eye to truth and reality. Let us not go along to get along. Let us not live within a lie. Let us end Canada's complicity and vote yes on Bill C-233, the No More Loopholes Act. Thank you all for coming. Next, I will go to Michael to speak.
Thank you very much, and good morning. On behalf of Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, I want to reiterate our support for Ms. Kwan's Bill C-233, the No More Loopholes Act, and urge Parliament to support this bill tomorrow afternoon at second reading. When the Canadian government adopted the Arms Trade Treaty in 2019, they decided to maintain major exemptions for the United States. The result is that the U.S. is the only destination for Canadian weapons that doesn't require permits subject to a human rights assessment. That's a double standard, and it ensures that the majority of Canada's military exports are left unregulated and unreported. This U.S. loophole undermines Canada's adherence to the Arms Trade Treaty. It virtually guarantees that Canadian weapons will be used to facilitate grave violations of human rights and international law. Recent events have clearly shown the danger and absurdity in entrusting the United States to be a safe destination for Canadian weapons. Right now, the U.S. and Israel are waging an illegal war of aggression against Iran, triggering a catastrophic regional conflict that has already killed over 1,200 people. Overwhelming evidence points to U.S. responsibility for targeted strikes on a girls' elementary school, which killed 168 children. Our own Prime Minister, despite his vocal initial support for the U.S.-Israeli action, has conceded that it appears to be inconsistent with international law. Meanwhile, Trump has recently threatened to annex Greenland, has kidnapped the head of state of Venezuela, and is attempting to starve the people of Cuba into submission. In the U.S. itself, Canadian armored vehicles have been sold to ICE to support the deportation squads that are terrorizing American cities. The loophole in Canada's arms control regime also entrusts the United States to be responsible when transferring Canadian arms to third parties, including Israel. A massive pipeline of Canadian weapons and components continue to flow to Israel freely via this loophole, despite Canada's so-called pause on arms exports. This includes hundreds of shipments linked to the production of weapons used by Israel in Gaza, including F-35 fighter jets. This also includes a contract for artillery ammunition produced in Quebec that is destined for the Israeli military, which the Trade Minister's office was warned about. If these shipments were being sent directly from Canada to Israel, they would not be allowed to go ahead. So why is this arms deal acceptable when it is routed through the United States? The truth is that Canada is abdicating its legal responsibilities by trying to pretend that this isn't happening. Parliament must take action to address this problem. Trump's escalating acts of aggression prove that Canada cannot continue to delegate its arms control responsibilities to the United States. We are calling on all members of Parliament to support this bill and reassert Canada's authority over its military exports, as it does with every other country. Adopting Bill C-233 would be a critical step towards ending Canada's complicity in genocide, war crimes, and violations of the UN Charter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. Next, we'll have Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us. My name is Daniel Komesch, and I'm the Manager of Policy and Advocacy at Oxfam Canada. Oxfam is an international confederation networked in 76 countries, including in Palestine, where we've been working since the 1950s. Today, our entire Confederation is working to respond to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Our work in Gaza includes delivering safe drinking water, providing food vouchers and cash to support daily needs and dignity, supporting hygiene, delivering psychosocial supports, and providing seeds to farmers to support local food production. Despite more than 2 years of active genocide by Israel in Gaza that has resulted in the deaths of more than 70,000 Palestinians, injured more than 170,000, destroyed or damaged 80% of all structures in Gaza, and displaced nearly the entire population, Canada is still sending arms components to Israel. While Canada has stopped issuing permits for new transfers of weapons and components going directly to Israel, a second channel by which these transfers are made is still widely active. That is, sending them first to the United States, where they are further assembled and shipped to Israel. We know from the fantastic work of our colleagues in the Arms Embargo Now network that Canada is sending propellants to fire artillery, key parts to support the F-35, and transiting TNT that is packed into other munitions, including 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs that are dropped on civilians. Israel continues to expand their attacks across the region today, including in Lebanon, where Oxfam is also working. As a Canadian human rights organization with partners and operations in Palestine, Lebanon, and the wider region, it is critical that we continue to push our government to end the indirect flow of weapons and components from Canada to Israel via the United States. The Canadian government's actions must reflect their words. We cannot commit to resolving a humanitarian situation while continuing to arm Israel with the very weapons that are the cause of this humanitarian catastrophe. Passing Bill C-233 is a small step Canada can take to reduce our complicity in genocide and our complicity in violations of international law and international humanitarian law. It's time to end the loophole. We call on all parliamentarians to support Bill C-233. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Next, we have Boutaïna.
Bon matin, je m'appelle Boutaïna Chafi, je suis membre du mouvement de la jeunesse palestinienne. Je tiens à remercier l'élu Jenny Kwan et mes collègues pour leurs interventions. Je vous parle aujourd'hui au nom de la coalition Embargo sur les armes maintenant, qui est une alliance de plus de 450 organisations représentant des millions de personnes à travers le pays, dont des syndicats, des institutions religieuses, des groupes de défenseurs des droits humains et des organisations dirigées par des Palestiniens. Il y a quelques mois, nous avons publié un rapport qui révélait les mensonges de ce gouvernement et l'ampleur des expéditions directes et indirectes d'armement vers Israël. Ces révélations ont mené les médias nationaux, certains élus et certains sénateurs, et plus important encore, des milliers de Canadiens à questionner le gouvernement sur la nature des exportations vers Israël. Depuis, l'inaction du gouvernement et les envois continus d'armes ont eu des conséquences réelles sur l'entièreté du Moyen-Orient. Notamment un soutien direct au génocide perpétré par Israël ayant tué des dizaines de milliers de Palestiniens à Gaza. Sans oublier le soutien canadien à l'expansion des attaques israéliennes partout dans la région, menant au bombardement simultané de près de 6 pays, dont l'Iran et le Liban. Partout au Canada, des nombreux Canadiens désabusés par les compromis moraux de nos politiques étrangères ont écouté avec espoir l'intervention du premier ministre Carney à Davos et ses promesses audacieuses d'engagement envers les valeurs fondamentales et le respect des droits humains. Par contre, nous savons que tant et aussi longtemps que notre droit interne ne s'harmonise pas au traité sur le commerce des armes, ce gouvernement continuera de contribuer directement à des violations des droits humains, à des crimes de guerre et aux crimes de génocide partout dans le monde. Et donc, sans relâche, nous avons organisé des rencontres, des campagnes d'appels et de courriels, des mobilisations et plus encore partout dans le pays pour que nos élus au Parlement répondent à nos questions et poussent le gouvernement Carney et la ministre Anand à mettre en place un réel embargo sur les armes en mettant fin à cette faille qui permet l'envoi de millions de dollars d'armement vers Israël via les États-Unis. C'est pourquoi demain, les élus au Parlement devront faire un choix. Mettront-ils fin, une fois pour toutes, à cette complicité, Répondront-ils à l'appel de la majorité des Canadiens qui les ont élus et voteront-ils en faveur d'un embargo sur les armes vers Israël en soutenant le projet de loi C-233? Ou bien continueront-ils d'armer un génocide et des guerres sans fin, concrétisant ainsi la place du Canada du mauvais côté de l'histoire? Merci.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Next, last but not least, we have Khaled.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Peace be with you. My name is Khaled Al-Qazzaz and I'm the Executive Director of CMPAC, Canadian Muslim Public Affairs Council. We're a national advocacy and lobbying organization present in major cities across Canada. Over the last few years, the Muslim community, alongside many others across civil society, have watched in horror as the genocide against Palestinians in Gaza unfold. A recent United Nations Human Rights Office report released in February 2026 raises serious concerns about ethnic cleansing by the Israeli government in both Gaza and the West Bank. Amid escalating attacks and forcible transfers that aimed at the permanent displacement of Palestinians throughout the occupied territories. For many Muslims in Canada, this crisis is not only a political issue, but a deeply personal and moral one. Palestinians include Muslims, Christians, and others who are part of a broader human family, and the suffering we're witnessing resonates profoundly within our communities, our places of worship, and our families. Guided by values of justice, sanctity of life, and the responsibility to stand against all oppression, Muslim Canadians have felt a particular urgency to speak out and to call for accountability. In response, our communities have mobilized, protested, and we have engaged elected officials. We have called the Canadian government to make a clear and consistent commitment to upholding international law wherever violations occur and whoever the victims may be. A few weeks ago at Davos, Prime Minister Carney spoke about a changing global order. He spoke about the role of middle powers like Canada and about how international law has too often been applied with varying degrees of rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. Today, we're here to put these words to test. The government faces a clear choice whether to uphold its stated values or allow these values to become empty words while Canadian weapons continue to be used in genocide and conflict that harm civilians in Gaza and elsewhere around the world. For too long, the loophole in Canada's export laws have allowed Canadian-made weapons to flow through the United States without safeguards required under Canada's international obligations. This is not just a bureaucratic oversight, it undermines Canadian credibility, Canadian sovereignty, and our stated commitment to human rights. Every day this loophole remains open. Canadian weapons are contributing to potential genocides, wars, violations of international law, and atrocities abroad. This is not acceptable. Today we're calling on members of Parliament to take decisive action, vote in favor of Bill C-233 so that it can advance to committee where proper debate and amendments can take place. This bill is the tool we have right now to close a dangerous and deadly gap in Canadian law. Delaying, dismissing, or ignoring it is both morally, politically, and legally indefensible. The Parliament must act to stop weapons from fueling atrocities. We can no longer allow loopholes that put innocent civilians at risk anywhere in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now open for questions.
Merci, thank you. We'll now go to the questions. I recognize one journalist in the room, and after we'll go on Zoom. Rafi Boudjikajan, CBC.
Thanks very much. Hi, Jenny. I'm wondering if you have any sense of how many Liberal MPs will vote to support C-233 tomorrow, and if there is any more possible room for compromise with that party. You mentioned amendments, possibly.
Well, thank you very much for that question. By my count, so far, I think there may be somewhere between 9 to 16 Liberal members who may support the bill. In terms of discussion about possible revisions, I have said at the outset, in fact, at the very beginning, before the bill was even introduced, I approached the Parliamentary Secretary, Rob Oliphant, who is the Parl-Sec to Foreign Affairs, to indicate that I'm intending to table this private member's bill and that I would be more than willing to engage in discussion with the government about how we can ensure the bill passes. Since then, there has been no follow-up with potential amendments to my bill. As indicated, I've had a member of parliament approach me to indicate that they want to see the bill go to committee, which I also want to as well, because I think that this issue deserves to be studied at the committee and to have expert witnesses come forward and for us to move forward in a cohesive way to address this situation. And I said to the member that I'm very willing to entertain amendments. Please send me your proposals. That was before Christmas, and no amendments has come forward. I had a discussion with another member of parliament about potential amendments, and when we sat down to talk about this, the individual said, "But we can't touch the U.S." And so I responded to say, since the loophole is the U.S., how would you propose that we proceed? I have received nothing. So there's been a lot of talk about potential amendments, a lot of talk about wanting to see this move forward to committee. I have yet to see anything from anyone with respect to that. So I remain open. The vote is tomorrow. We can talk about potential amendments if there are amendments to come forward, and I will reiterate my willingness to entertain that. At the end of the day, what are we talking about? We're talking about a situation where Canada, since 2019, made an exemption to the United States because of our history and so on. And they made that exemption so that arms parts components, including technology that's shipped to the United States, would not go through any review, case-by-case review or assessment. And as such, these shipments go through the general permit exporting system. And what we have found with credible reports from the CBC, amongst others, to indicate that Canadian-made arms have ended up in countries where it is raining down destruction on civilians. And we have seen, for example, Canadian brand weaponry in Sudan as an example. And this is real. This is happening in real time right now. And all the members of parliament that spoke yesterday and in its first round of second reading on my bill all spoke about how they do not want to see Canada to be complicit. They all spoke about how I am well-meaning with my bill. If they truly believe in that, then let's make it work. Put the effort and put the work into it. Have the courage to actually take the necessary action to stop this complicity. Canadians, when you talk to Canadians on the street, when I talk to Canadians on the street, 100%, they've all said to me that they do not want to see Canada complicit in these atrocities. They do not want to see Canada complicit in the killings of civilians, in genocide, in war crimes, in violation of international law. So we have an opportunity to do exactly that with my bill, Bill C-233. When I gave instructions to the alleged drafter, I was very precise about it. I said, I want to end the loophole. I don't want all the bells and whistles that go with it. I want it to be clear and concise. And the goal here is to end the loophole so Canada can say that we are not part of these atrocities, that we will have no part in it. And that's what the drafting drafter came up with. And with that, there's also an accountability measure so that we can all know and rest with the knowledge that we are, in fact, abiding by the Arms Trade Treaty, no exemptions. That's what this bill is about. And I remain open to talk to anyone who want to move this forward, who want to realize that outcome for Canada.
Thanks. And if I can just ask you about last night's Take Note debate as a follow-up. Late into it, the defense minister said he believes the conflict is spiraling out of control in Iran, that is, and Middle East and Gulf. Do you agree with that assessment? And what do you expect to hear from the Prime Minister today, since he was not around yesterday for that?
I do think that the war in the Middle East, the attack, is spiraling out of control. I don't know if the people who engaged in this start of the war has really an end game. To be honest, I don't know what the Prime Minister was thinking when he first came out in support of this war. I was quite taken aback to hear that. You know, I absolutely agree that the Iranian regime has engaged in atrocious behavior and activities. With the latest information on the recent attack of their own citizens, killing people in protests, their repression, and so on, absolutely is despicable, to say the least. However, we're also in Canada where we abide by the rule of law, on international law. And that war is in violation of international law. I couldn't quite comprehend how the Canadian government, how the Prime Minister can come forward and say he supported it. Then, of course, since he's been making changes to his remarks, and as it stands right now, to be honest with you, I don't know where Canada stands. I don't know where the Prime Minister is at, you know? And Canada has played an important historical role in advancing diplomacy, in advancing peace as a middle power. And we seem to have lost sight of all of that. And the words that the Prime Minister spoke at Davos do not match his actions. You know, and when he said that we can't turn a blind eye to reality, well, we are. We are turning a blind eye to reality. We're making exceptions whenever the government feels like it. The Prime Minister said that we can't go along to get along. Well, we are going along to get along with those kinds of comments in first supporting the United States and Israel in this attack on Iran. He is going along to get along with knowing that Canada's arms, weaponry, parts, components is being exported to the United States and then ending up in countries that is raining down destruction on civilians and killing civilians. Since the ceasefire in Gaza, more than 560 Palestinians have been killed. And we're turning a blind eye to that, as though that this is not happening. And for all we know, some of it may be as a result of Canadian weaponry. He said in Davos that we cannot live within a lie. We are living within a lie with our arms exports right now. So he needs to confront that reality. And instead of whipping their members to say no to this bill, perhaps he should say, we need to actually have the courage to do the things that he said we would do, to realize those sentiments and the values that he articulated in the international stage. And let's live by action and not just through words of what we do. So I'm calling on the Prime Minister to support my bill today. And maybe he will also provide clarity on Canada's stance on Iran. Maybe he'll admit that his first statement, when he first came out and supported the war on Iran, and to correct it and say that was wrong. And to say Canada stands by unequivocally on international law.
Next, we'll go real quick on Zoom for Dylan Robertson, the Canadian Press. Dylan, you have the floor.
Hi there. I just wanted clarity on whipping the members to say no to this bill. Do you actually have any knowledge that that's going to happen tomorrow?
Yesterday at the second hour debate on my bill. We had Liberal members who got up to speak. We had Conservative members who got up to speak, and with Bloc members who got up to speak to say that they would not support the bill. Now, we also had Liberal members, MP Selma Said, who got up to say that she would support the bill. So this is sort of where it is at. So where I am taking the notion that there are a number of MPs who will say no to this bill is based on their word with their speeches. I hope I'm wrong. To be honest with you, nothing will make me more happy than I'm absolutely 1,000% wrong on that assumption. But because there is still time. There is still time for us to get there, to get this bill passed, because the vote is not until tomorrow after question period. And I am calling on every single member of parliament to look at truth and reality, to examine the bill, not through the rhetoric and the misinformation and disinformation that's being provided and circulating out there, not to just narrate the words of the defense industry and to really look at the truth of it. And what am I asking for with this bill? I am simply saying that the parts, weapons, components that is shipped to the United States would have to go through the same process as for any other country, and that is to say that it needs to go through the assessment of the Arms Trade Treaty on risk assessment to make sure that Canada abides by the terms of the Arms Trade Treaty with these shipments under this general permitting process, that our weapons don't end up in countries that is in violation of the Arms Trade Treaty.
And if I could just ask a follow-up, I'm wondering how you'd respond to part of what Conservative MP Tamara Coronas said in the House yesterday. You'd already spoken to the parts about supply chains, about diplomatic issues, but she also had a point about, we should improve the existing structure so that it's more transparent, there's more reporting requirements, have more oversight within the current framework. I'm just wondering if you could speak to why that doesn't meet the bar for what you're trying to accomplish here.
Because she's talking about under the current framework. And what is the current framework? The current framework gives blanket exemptions to the United States. The exports that go through to the United States under the general permits do not require risk assessments in accordance with the Arms Trade Treaty. There is no case-by-case review of those shipments. So if you use the existing structure, it is right out of the gate missing a significant part of the exports of arms, weapons, components from Canada to another destination. And so which is why it is critical that we ensure that there is no exemption. And by the way, NATO allies that signed on to the Arms Trade Treaty, they provided no exemptions, and they included the United States in their risk assessments. Canada is the outlier on this, by the way. And so if we're true to our word, to which Conservative MPs, Bloc MPs, and government MPs have said that this is well-intentioned, that they do not want Canada to be complicit. Well, take action. We have a chance. We have a chance to do exactly that. In the very minimum, send this to committee. Send this to committee and let us examine these amendments that they have in mind that somehow they think will work. I am all ears about that. Let's make it work, because at the end of the day, what is this about? It is a nonpartisan issue. It is about saving lives. It is about Canada's values and credibility in the international stage. And it is about ending Canada's complicity in war crimes, crimes against humanity, human rights abuses, and genocide.
Thank you. I see no more questions on Zoom. Rafi, do you have another follow-up in your card? You don't have to.
Well, I was wondering if anyone else would like to weigh in on the question of whether the conflict is spiraling out of control.
I think everyone following this closely can see that that Israel and the U.S. have been escalating the war without any real endgame except notions of regime change. And there's no clear sense of what they're going to accept as a victory, given all of the analysis suggests that there isn't going to be regime change from this campaign. So where are they going to cut the cord? Nobody knows. And in the meantime, a lot of people are going to die for no reason. That's why I think it's really important to emphasize what Jenny Kwan was saying, which is that it's very important that Mark Carney do more to correct his mistake from his original statement. It's not enough to add additional language about international law. The problem is not just about how the war now is being conducted. The war itself, as it was launched, was illegal, was a breach of the UN Charter. And that is something that Carney has not addressed. They're saying that they're calling all parties to respect the law. If that was true, this war would end today. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done from this government to assure us that they actually understand international law, that they understand or that they have a vision for Canada playing a de-escalatory role, not just using the word de-escalation, but actually putting pressure on their partners to end the violence, to bring an end to the aggression. And we need to impose sanctions on those that are involved in these atrocities. So I think it is very concerning that to this day we still don't have a strong answer from this government.
Thank you. I'll use the privilege of moderator to ask a question en français, peut-être à Madame du mouvement des jeunes palestiniens. Je voulais savoir si vous pouvez comparer, on a eu changement de gouvernement, on avait Justin Trudeau comme premier ministre, maintenant Mark Carney. J'aimerais savoir si, selon votre avis, votre vision des choses, il y a eu un changement de position du Canada concernant le conflit à Gaza, ou comment vous le qualifiez? Est-ce que c'est une amélioration, une détérioration?
Merci pour la question. Je pense qu'il y a une continuité dans l'idéologie du gouvernement libéral, que ce soit entre Justin Trudeau et Mark Carney. On a entendu à plusieurs reprises l'ancienne ministre des Affaires étrangères, Mélanie Joly, répéter les mêmes mensonges que reprend aujourd'hui Anita Anand à multiples reprises à chaque fois qu'on lui pose des questions en lien avec les exportations d'armes. Par contre, le changement qui est notable et que la majorité des Canadiens ont aperçu, c'est que le premier ministre Carney met beaucoup l'accent sur investir dans l'industrie de la défense qui va contre la demande de la majorité des Canadiens qui ne veulent pas que des armes continuent d'être envoyées vers les États-Unis pour qu'elles soient ensuite envoyées vers Israël pour continuer comme Jenny Kwan l'a dit, de continuer de contribuer à la destruction qui a lieu partout dans la région. Donc, à mon sens, je ne vois pas qu'il y a un changement dans la direction. Par contre, je vois qu'il y a plusieurs contradictions, plusieurs mensonges que le gouvernement actuel met de l'avant, dont mes collègues en ont parlé très longtemps par rapport à l'intervention qui a été faite à Davos et les actions du premier ministre.
Merci beaucoup. Voilà qui conclut cette conférence de presse. Merci à tous. Thank you.